Commander Jack Harrison stood on the bridge of the human research vessel Endeavour as it drifted through the dark space near the galactic rim. The stars here looked different than the ones near Earth, older and colder somehow. His crew had been exploring this region for 3 months now, mapping new systems and looking for signs of ancient civilizations. What they found instead would change everything for humanity. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the life support systems. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at the pilot station, her fingers dancing across the control panel as she kept the ship steady. Behind her, Dr. Lisa Morgan worked at the science station, studying readings from the massive derelict structure they had discovered floating in the void. The structure was unlike anything humans had ever seen before. It was easily 10 kilometers long and shaped like a twisted spiral of metal and crystal. The hull showed signs of great age, covered in impact craters and radiation scarring. But the most interesting thing about it was that it was still sending out a weak signal, a pattern of pulses that repeated every few minutes. Jack walked over to where Lisa was working. She looked up at him with excitement in her eyes. She had been studying alien artifacts for most of her career, but nothing like this had ever been found before. The readings her instruments were giving her suggested that the structure was at least 50,000 years old, maybe older. "Captain, you need to see this," Lisa said, pointing to her screen. "The signal is not random. It is some kind of data transmission, and I think I am starting to understand parts of it." Jack leaned closer to look at the display. The screen showed wave patterns and mathematical sequences that meant nothing to him, but Lisa's excitement was obvious. She had always been good at puzzles, and this was the biggest puzzle she had ever encountered. "What kind of data?" Jack asked. "Historical records, I think. Maybe star charts or navigation data. The computer is still working on the translation, but some of the mathematical constants are universal. Give me a few more hours, and I might be able to make sense of it." Before Jack could respond, the communication officer called out from across the bridge. "Captain, we are receiving a priority transmission from command. It is marked as urgent." Jack nodded and walked back to his command chair, put it through. The main screen flickered and then showed the face of Admiral Susan Blake. She looked tired and worried, which was unusual for her. Susan Blake had been in the military for 30 years and had seen just about everything the galaxy could throw at humanity. If she was worried, then something serious was happening. "Jack, I need you to return to New Denver immediately. We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" Jack asked. "The kind that could end human expansion into space permanently." "How soon can you be here?" Jack looked at Amy, who was already calculating jump coordinates. 18 hours if we push the engines." "Do it. And Jack, whatever you found out there, bring all the data with you. We might need every advantage we can get." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Jack looked around at his crew, seeing the same questions in their faces that he felt in his own mind. What could be serious enough to make Admiral Blake look scared? 18 hours later, the Endeavour dropped out of hyperspace near New Denver, the largest human colony outside of Earth. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents that reminded Jack of home. But today there was something different about the system. Ships were everywhere, more than Jack had ever seen in one place before. Military vessels from Earth, cargo ships from the outer colonies, and civilian transports all crowded the space around New Denver. It looked like humanity was preparing for war, but against whom? As the Endeavour approached the planet, Jack received another communication from Admiral Blake. This time she was not alone. President Richard Stone was with her, along with several other high-ranking officials Jack did not recognize. "Commander Harrison, dock at Station 7 immediately. Bring Dr. Morgan and all the data from your mission. We have visitors, and they are not friendly." The docking procedure seemed to take forever, but finally Jack and Lisa were walking through the corridors of the space station toward the conference room where Admiral Blake was waiting. The corridors were crowded with military personnel and civilians, all looking nervous and excited at the same time. When they reached the conference room, Jack saw that it was packed with people. Military officers, scientists, politicians, and diplomats filled every chair and lined the walls. At the front of the room, a large holographic display showed the image of something that made Jack's blood run cold. It was an alien, but not like the friendly species humanity had met before. This creature was tall and reptilian, with scales that gleamed like metal and eyes that burned with intelligence and contempt. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding stone. I am Supreme Commander Korvax of the Hegemony. Humanity will cease all expansion beyond your current territories immediately. You will surrender your military fleet and accept vassal status under our rule. You have 30 standard days to comply. Refusal means extinction. The 30 days passed like a blur of preparation and fear. Admiral Susan Blake stood in the command center of New Denver Station, watching as the last civilian transport jumped to hyperspace. The evacuation had gone better than expected, but she knew that many people had chosen to stay behind to help defend the colony. President Richard Stone had made the decision that would define humanity's future. They would not bow to the hegemony's demands. The message had been sent to every human world, and the response had been unanimous. From Earth to the farthest colonies, humanity had chosen to fight rather than submit to slavery. Commander Jack Harrison had spent the last month working with Dr. Lisa Morgan to understand the data they had found in the ancient derelict. What they discovered gave humanity hope, but also made the stakes even higher. The derelict belonged to a race called the Precursors, who had fought the hegemony thousands of years ago and lost. But their records showed that the hegemony was not as invincible as they claimed to be. Now Jack stood on the bridge of his ship, the Endeavor, as part of a small fleet defending New Denver. The human fleet was tiny compared to what was coming, but they had advantages the hegemony did not expect. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable than the heavy warships the aliens preferred. More importantly, human tactics were unpredictable, in ways that confused enemies who had conquered hundreds of worlds using the same methods. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez piloted her fighter alongside dozens of others, waiting for the moment when the hegemony fleet would arrive. She had volunteered to lead the fighter squadrons, even though everyone knew it was likely a suicide mission. Her fighter was small and fragile compared to the alien warships, but it was also fast and hard to hit. The space around New Denver seemed empty and peaceful, but Amy knew that was about to change. Long-range sensors had detected the hegemony fleet hours ago, and they will be dropping out of hyperspace any moment. The waiting was the hardest part, but Amy used the time to review her flight plans and check her weapon systems one more time. Dr. Lisa Morgan was not on any of the ships in the fleet. Instead, she was deep underground on New Denver, in a bunker that housed the planet's defensive systems. The quantum torpedoes were her design, based on technology from the Precursor records. They were untested in real combat, but computer simulations suggested they would be effective against hegemony shields. The alert klaxon sounded throughout the system as massive shapes began appearing in space. The hegemony fleet was enormous, with dozens of ships that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. The lead ship was clearly the flagship, a kilometer-long monster bristling with weapons and armor. It looked like it could destroy New Denver. All by itself, Supreme Commander Korvax appeared on the communication channels, his reptilian face showing satisfaction and contempt. He had expected to find humans cowering and ready to surrender. Instead, he saw a small fleet arranged in battle formation and a planet that showed no signs of submission. Humans, this is your final chance to surrender. Lay down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Your resistance is meaningless against the might of the hegemony. Admiral Blake's response was broadcast on all frequencies so that every ship in both fleets could hear it. This is Admiral Susan Blake of the human fleet. We reject your demands and will defend our freedom with our lives. If you want this system, you will have to take it by force. The battle began immediately. The hegemony ships moved forward in perfect formation, their weapons charging for a coordinated attack that would sweep the human fleet from space. But Jack Harrison had studied the tactics the hegemony used against other species, and he was ready for them. All ships, execute Plan Delta, Jack commanded. The human fleet scattered in all directions, breaking their formation and making it impossible for the hegemony to target them effectively. Individual ships began darting between the larger alien vessels, firing quantum torpedoes at close range before spinning away to avoid return fire. Amy Rodriguez led her fighter squadron straight at the hegemony flagship, weaving between the massive gun turrets as they tried to track her small craft. Her fighters were too small and fast for the big guns to hit, but the flagship also carried smaller, defensive weapons that were designed to stop exactly this kind of attack. 3 of Amy's pilots were destroyed in the first pass, their fighters turned to vapor by alien energy beams. But the survivors reached their target and launched their torpedoes at the flagship's main reactor. The quantum weapons punched through the alien shields like they were not even there, causing massive explosions along the ship's hull. Commander Korvax felt his flagship shake under the unexpected attack. His shield should have stopped any human weapon easily, but somehow the small fighters had damaged his ship. Rage filled his mind as he realized that these primitive humans were actually fighting back effectively. On New Denver, Lisa Morgan watched her defensive systems come online. The quantum torpedo launchers hidden across the planet's surface began firing at the hegemony ships in orbit. Each torpedo was guided by artificial intelligence that could adjust its course to hit moving targets. The alien ships found themselves under attack from the planet itself. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships darted and weaved between the alien vessels, striking and running before the heavier weapons could respond. The quantum torpedoes proved devastatingly effective against hegemony technology, cutting through their shields and armor like paper. But the humans were taking losses too. Ship after ship was destroyed by alien fire, and Amy's fighter squadron was down to half strength. The Endeavor had taken serious damage, and Jack Harrison knew his ship could not take much more punishment. Then something unprecedented happened. One of the smaller hegemony vessels, badly damaged by quantum torpedo hits, turned and began retreating toward the edge of the system. Then another ship followed, and another. For the first time in their history, hegemony forces were running. From battle. Commander Korvax could not believe what he was seeing. His fleet was retreating, his ships were damaged, and these upstart humans had actually forced him to withdraw. The shame and rage he felt were beyond anything he had experienced before. No species had ever made the hegemony retreat, not once in 1,000 years of conquest. As the alien fleet jumped to hyperspace, Admiral Blake allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They had won, against impossible odds. But she knew this was only the beginning. The hegemony will return with more ships and better preparation. The real war was just starting. 3 weeks after the battle at New Denver, Commander Jack Harrison guided the damaged Endeavor through an asteroid field that seemed to stretch on forever. The coordinates they were following came from the precursor data, leading them to a location marked as significant, but with no explanation of what they might find there. Dr. Lisa Morgan sat beside him, studying the sensor readings with growing excitement. The asteroids were not normal rocks floating in space. Many of them showed signs of artificial modification, with smooth surfaces and geometric patterns carved into their sides. Some had what looked like docking ports and communication arrays built into their structure. This was not a natural asteroid field, but a hidden construction project on a massive scale. "Jack, look at this," Lisa said, pointing to her scanner display. "These asteroids are hollow. There are power sources inside them and what looks like atmospheric readings. Someone is living here." Before Jack could respond, the Endeavor's communication system came alive with a signal unlike anything they had ever heard. The sound was like crystal chimes mixed with electronic music, beautiful and alien at the same time. Then a voice spoke in perfect English, though it had an odd quality that suggested it was being translated from something very different. Human vessel, you have found us. We have been waiting for someone like you for a very long time. Please, follow the guidance beacon to our main habitat. Do not be afraid. A bright light appeared ahead of them, moving slowly through the asteroid field. Jack decided to trust whoever was speaking and followed the beacon deeper into the hidden city. What they found, there was beyond anything humans had imagined possible. The asteroids were connected by transparent tubes that contained atmosphere and artificial gravity. Ships moved between the asteroids like cars on highways, carrying cargo and passengers from one habitat to another. The beings living here looked like living crystals, their bodies reflecting light in patterns that seemed to change with their emotions. The main habitat was inside an asteroid, the size of a small moon. When the Endeavour docked, Jack and Lisa were met by a delegation of the crystal beings. Their leader was taller than the others, with faceted surfaces that showed deep blue and purple colors. It spoke with the same musical voice they had heard over the radio. I am the one you may call Elder Diamond. We are the Ashanti, though your species has probably been told we were destroyed by the hegemony 3,000 years ago. We chose to. Let them believe that rather than continue a war we could not win. Lisa stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her amazement. You have been hiding here for 3,000 years? How is that possible? We learned patience and secrecy. The hegemony believes they destroyed our homeworld and all our people. They stopped looking for us because they thought we were extinct. But we have been growing stronger, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Elder Diamond led them through corridors filled with other crystal beings going about their daily lives. Children that sparkled like jewels played games that involved manipulating light patterns. Workers tended the gardens where plants grew in rainbow colors. This was not just a hiding place, but a thriving civilization. We monitored your battle at New Denver, Elder Diamond continued. For the first time in millennia, someone made the hegemony retreat. Your species has done what we thought was impossible. Jack felt a surge of pride, but also worry. They will come back with more ships. We cannot defeat the entire hegemony with just human forces. No, but you will not be fighting alone. We are part of something larger, something the hegemony has never suspected. There are others like us, species that chose hiding over extinction. We call ourselves the Underground. Over the next several days, Jack and Lisa learned about the secret network that had been growing in the galaxy's shadows. Dozens of species that the hegemony believed they had destroyed were actually living in hidden colonies, slowly rebuilding their strength and waiting for an opportunity to fight back. The Whispers were beings made of gas, an energy who could infiltrate hegemony. Computer networks without being detected. The builders looked like giant insects, but were master engineers who could construct fleets of ships in hidden factories. Each species had survived by using their unique abilities to stay hidden while preparing for eventual revenge. Admiral Susan Blake received Jack's report with amazement and hope. The Underground was willing to share their advanced technology with humanity in exchange for human tactical knowledge and leadership. The crystal beings had shield technology that could protect entire fleets, while the builders could construct ships faster than any human factory. A secret meeting was arranged in the Veil Nebula, a region of space where sensor readings were unreliable and ships could gather without being detected. Representatives from 30 different species arrived, many of them supposedly extinct according to hegemony records. The diversity was incredible, with beings of every imaginable shape and size united by their hatred of their oppressors. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez found herself training mixed squadrons of pilots from different species. Each race had developed their own fighting techniques during their years in hiding. The gaseous Whispers could phase through solid matter, making them nearly impossible to hit. The insectoid builders had reflexes faster than human thought, allowing them to dodge attacks that would destroy other fighters. But the humans brought something new to the alliance: something that impressed even species with thousands of years of experience. Human tactics were unpredictable and creative in ways that confused enemies used to fighting conventional battles. More importantly, humans were willing to sacrifice themselves to protect others, a concept that many species had never encountered. Before Dr. Lisa Morgan worked with alien scientists to combine human and alien technology in ways neither could achieve alone. Human quantum torpedoes became even more effective when combined with Ashanti targeting systems. Builder construction. Techniques could produce human-designed ships at incredible speed. The cooperation was producing weapons and defenses far superior to anything the hegemony had faced before. Meanwhile, Supreme Commander Korvax was dealing with problems he had never experienced. Hegemony supply convoys were disappearing without trace. Communication networks were suffering mysterious failures. Equipment was breaking down at rates that suggested sabotage. He suspected treachery within his own ranks, but could not identify the source. The paranoia was spreading through the hegemony command structure. Officers were accusing each other of disloyalty, and several high-ranking commanders had been executed on suspicion of treason. The unity that had held the hegemony together for millennia was beginning to crack under the pressure of fighting an enemy they could not see or understand. In the hidden base in the Veil Nebula, Admiral Blake looked at the representatives of the Underground and felt something she had not experienced since the war began. Hope. For the first time, humanity was not fighting alone against impossible odds. They had allies, powerful ones who had been preparing for this war far longer than humans had existed as a spacefaring species. The galaxy was about to discover that the hegemony was not as invincible as they believed. The Underground was ready to emerge from the shadows, and when they did, the balance of power in the galaxy would shift forever. The attack began at exactly the same moment across 12 different star systems. Admiral Susan Blake had coordinated the timing perfectly, using the Underground's secret communication network to ensure that every strike happened simultaneously. The hegemony would have no time to warn their other bases or coordinate a response. Commander Jack Harrison led the assault on the hegemony weapons research facility in the core system. His fleet was a mixture of human ships and alien vessels that had been hiding in the shadows for centuries. Ashanti cruisers with their crystal hulls reflecting starlight flew alongside human destroyers armed with quantum torpedoes. Builder fighters that looked like mechanical insects swarmed around Whisper Scouts that were barely visible even to their own allies. The research facility was enormous, a space station the size of a small city orbiting a dead world. Intelligence. Reports suggested it housed the hegemony's most advanced weapons projects, including something called the Starbreaker that had been mentioned in intercepted communications. Whatever it was, the Underground could not allow the hegemony to complete it. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez piloted her fighter through the outer defenses, leading a mixed squadron that included pilots from 6 different species. The diversity of the attack force was confusing the hegemony defenders, who had never faced enemies that could phase through walls or move at impossible speeds. Their tactical computers were overloading trying to track targets that did not behave according to any known patterns. Dr. Lisa Morgan was aboard the Endeavor, monitoring the data streams that builder technicians were extracting from the facilities. Computer systems. What she was seeing made her blood run cold. The Starbreaker was not just a weapon, but a mobile fortress capable of destroying entire solar systems. The hegemony had built it specifically to use against Earth and other human worlds. The battle for the research station was fierce but brief. Hegemony forces were trained to fight conventional enemies using predictable tactics. They had no experience dealing with Whisper infiltrators who could disable their weapon systems from the inside, or builder demolition experts who could place explosives in locations that should have been impossible to reach. Jack watched as the massive station began to break apart under the combined assault. Secondary explosions chained through the structure as ammunition stores and fuel tanks detonated. But even as the facility died, its computers were transmitting data to other hegemony bases. The Underground had captured valuable intelligence, but they had also revealed their existence to their enemies. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out in 11 other systems. Hegemony supply depots were burning, communication relays were going silent, and slave worlds were being liberated by fleets that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. For the first time in their history, the hegemony was fighting a war on multiple fronts against enemies they could not predict or counter. Supreme Commander Korvax stood in the command center of his flagship, watching reports pour in from across the galaxy. In a single day, the hegemony had lost more ships and facilities than in the previous century of conquest. The attacks were coordinated and professional, suggesting an enemy with resources and organization far beyond what humans should have been capable of achieving. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The species they had destroyed over the millennia were not extinct after all. They had been hiding, growing stronger, and now they were striking back with human help. The very success of hegemony expansion had created the conditions for their own downfall. Dr. Carl Peterson, a human archaeologist who had been studying precursor ruins, made a discovery that changed everything. Deep in the archives of the destroyed research facility, he found references to the Starbreaker's construction. The weapon was not just theoretical, but already built and operational. Worse, it was heading directly toward Earth. The Starbreaker was a fortress ship 20 kilometers long, armed with a weapon that could crack planets apart and turn stars into supernovas. It had been used only once before, against the precursor homeworld, turning an entire solar system into radioactive debris. Now it was moving toward Earth with enough firepower to destroy humanity's birth world and everyone on it. Admiral Blake received the news while coordinating the underground's next wave of attacks. The strategic situation had suddenly become desperate. All their victories meant nothing if the hegemony could destroy Earth and break human morale. But the Starbreaker was too heavily defended for any conventional attack to succeed. That was when Dr. Peterson made his second discovery. The precursors had been working on a counterweapon when their civilization was destroyed. They called it the Unity Field, a device that could supposedly turn the Starbreaker's own power against itself. The plans were incomplete, but they suggested a way to not only stop the ultimate weapon, but to end the war entirely. Elder, Diamond, and the other underground leaders gathered in emergency session to study the precursor data. The Unity Field required technology from dozens of different species, each contributing a piece of the puzzle that no single race could complete alone. It would be the greatest engineering project in galactic history, and they had less than a month to complete it before the Starbreaker reached Earth. The work began immediately. Ashanti engineers designed quantum resonators that could amplify psychic energy across interstellar distances. Builder factories constructed components with precision measured in individual atoms. Whisper technicians created software that could coordinate the thoughts and emotions of billions of sentient beings. Human scientists provide the creativity and adaptability needed to make incompatible technologies work together. Amy Rodriguez found herself leading supply runs to dozens of hidden bases, carrying components and personnel between worlds while avoiding hegemony patrols. Her fighter squadrons had grown to include pilots from every species in the underground, creating a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were not just soldiers, but symbols of cooperation between races that had been enemies for millennia. As the Starbreaker approached the edge of human space, panic began to spread through the colonies. Some worlds were evacuated, while others prepared for siege. But on Earth itself, something unexpected was happening. President Richard Stone had made a public announcement that Earth would not be evacuated. Humanity would face its fate standing together, and anyone who wanted to leave was free to go. Most humans chose to stay. The decision spread to other species as well, with many underground colonies refusing to hide while their allies faced extinction. For the first time in galactic history, different species were willing to die together for principles that transcended their individual survival. Commander Korvax received reports of the Unity Field project but dismissed it as desperate fantasy. No weapon could stand against the Starbreaker, and certainly not some theoretical device cobbled together by primitive species. He increased speed toward Earth, eager to end this rebellion once and for all. But in hidden laboratories across the Trui galaxy, the impossible was becoming real. The unity field was taking shape, a network of quantum resonators that would link every willing mind in the galaxy into a single consciousness. If it worked, it would change not just the war, but the very nature of galactic civilization. If it failed, everything the Underground had fought for would die with Earth. Time was running out. The Starbreaker would reach Earth's solar system in 72 hours, and the Unity Field network was still incomplete. Dr. Lisa Morgan had not slept in 3 days as she worked with scientists from dozens of species to solve the final technical problems. The quantum resonators were built and ready, but placing them in the correct positions across the galaxy required a level of coordination that had never been attempted before. Commander Jack Harrison stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, watching. As the final components of the primary resonator array were installed in Earth's solar system. The device was massive, a crystalline structure that stretched between Earth and Mars like a bridge made of pure energy. When activated, it would serve as the central hub for the Unity Field network, connecting every willing mind in the galaxy into a single shared consciousness. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez had volunteered to lead the most dangerous mission of the war. Her job was to place the outer resonators in systems that were heavily defended by hegemony forces. Many of the pilots who flew with her would not return, but they all understood that failure meant the extinction of every free species in the galaxy. Amy's squadron now included pilots from 23 different species, each one bringing unique abilities that made the mission possible. Whisper Scouts could phase through solid matter to plant resonators inside enemy bases. Builder demolition experts could create diversions that drew defenders away from critical installations. Ashanti engineers could modify the resonators in real time to adapt to changing battlefield conditions. The first resonator placement mission took them to the Vega system, where a hegemony fortress guarded one of their primary supply routes. Amy led her mixed squadron through the outer defenses while Whisper infiltrators disabled the station's weapons from the inside. The resonator was successfully installed in the system's asteroid belt, but 3 pilots were lost in the retreat. Each mission became more difficult as the hegemony began to understand what the Underground was trying to accomplish. Supreme Commander Korvax had finally realized that the attacks on his facilities were not random, but part of a larger plan. He ordered all available ships to hunt down the resonator placement teams, but the Underground pilots proved too elusive and unpredictable for conventional tactics to counter. Dr. Carl Peterson worked frantically to decode the final sections of the Precursor Archives. The Unity Field was not just a weapon, but something far more profound. When activated, it will create a connection between all sentient minds willing to join it, allowing different species to share thoughts, emotions, and memories directly. The implications were staggering, but there was no time to consider the long-term consequences. On Earth, billions of humans refused evacuation orders despite the approaching Starbreaker. President Richard Stone had declared that humanity would face its fate with dignity, standing together rather than running in fear. The decision inspired similar choices across the galaxy as other species chose to stand with their human allies rather than hide in secret bases. Elder Diamond and the Ashanti leadership had moved their entire hidden fleet to Earth's solar system. The crystal beings had spent 3,000 years preparing for this moment, and they were not going to miss the final battle. Their ships formed a defensive line around the Unity Field resonator, determined to protect it until the system could be activated. Admiral Susan Blake coordinated the final preparations from a command center deep beneath Earth's surface. The Unity Field network was 90% complete, with resonators successfully placed in 47 star systems. But the remaining installations were in the most heavily defended hegemony territories, and time was running out. Amy Rodriguez led her squadron on the final Resonator mission, a desperate assault on the hegemony's home system. The mission was essentially suicide, but the Resonator had to be placed there for the Unity field to achieve full coverage. As her fighters approached the massive fortress stations surrounding the hegemony capital world, Amy knew that most of her pilots would not survive the next hour. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human fighters flew alongside Ashanti interceptors, while builder bombers dropped their payloads on hegemony defensive positions. Whisper infiltrators appeared inside enemy ships, sabotaging critical systems before vanishing like ghosts. The diversity of the attacking force created chaos among the defenders, who had never faced enemies that could fight in so many different ways. Amy managed to place the final Resonator on a small moon orbiting the hegemony capital, but the cost was terrible. Half her squadron was destroyed in the assault, and her own fighter was badly damaged. As she limped back toward friendly space, she wondered if their sacrifice would be enough to save the galaxy. The Starbreaker entered Earth's solar system. Like a dark omen, its massive hull blocking out stars as it approached. The fortress ship was larger than anything humanity had ever built, a 20-kilometer-long instrument of destruction that had already killed billions of people when it destroyed the precursor homeworld. Now it was preparing to do the same too. Earth, Commander Korvax stood on the bridge of his ultimate weapon, savoring the moment of final victory. The human homeworld hung before him like a blue jewel, beautiful and defenseless. He had planned to offer one final chance for surrender, but the sight of the Unity field Resonator structure convinced him that mercy was pointless. These primitive species would never learn their place until they were taught through overwhelming. Force Dr. Lisa Morgan watched her instruments as the Starbreaker began charging its primary weapon. The Unity field network was complete, but they had never tested it on this scale before. Theory suggested it would work, but theory had been wrong before. If she was making a mistake, every free species in the galaxy would pay the price. President Stone addressed Earth and the galaxy one final time before the Unity field was activated. His words were broadcast on every frequency, reaching planets and ships across known space. He spoke of humanity's journey from a single world to the stars, of the friends they had made and the enemies they had faced. But most importantly, he spoke of hope, of the belief that different species could work together for something greater than any of them could achieve alone. The Unity field activated just as the Starbreaker's weapon reached full charge. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then reality itself seemed to shift as billions of minds across the galaxy suddenly found themselves connected to each other. Humans felt the ancient wisdom of the Ashanti, while crystal beings experienced human creativity and determination. Every species in the network could suddenly understand what it meant to be someone completely different from themselves. The effect on the hegemony forces was immediate and devastating. Soldiers who had spent their lives following orders without question suddenly experienced empathy and compassion for the first time. They felt the fear and pain of their victims, the joy and hope of free beings, and the love that connected different species despite their differences. Entire hegemony fleets began defecting as their crews refused to continue fighting after experiencing what they had been trying to destroy. Even some of Korvax's own officers laid down their weapons, unable to reconcile their new understanding with their old beliefs. Supreme Commander Korvax felt his empire crumbling around him as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Entire fleets were laying down their weapons and refusing to fight. Worlds that had served the hegemony for centuries were declaring independence. Even on his own flagship, crew members were abandoning their posts rather than participate in the destruction of Earth. The Unity field had done something Korvax had never imagined possible. It had given his soldiers the ability to feel what their enemies felt, to understand what it meant to be free rather than enslaved. For beings who had spent their entire lives following orders without question, the experience was overwhelming and transformative. But Korvax himself was isolated in the Starbreaker's heavily shielded command center, cut off from the Unity field's influence. he could still give the order to fire the ultimate weapon, even if he had to do it alone. His rage and frustration had grown beyond rational thought. If he could not rule the galaxy, then he would destroy it rather than let others be free. Commander Jack Harrison watched from the bridge of the Endeavor as hegemony. Ships throughout the solar system began shutting down their weapons and broadcasting surrender signals. The Unity field was working beyond their wildest hopes, but the Starbreaker remained a deadly threat. Its shields were too powerful for the field to penetrate, and Korvax was still determined to fire his planet-killing weapon. Dr. Lisa Morgan monitored the energy readings from the Starbreaker with growing alarm. The weapon was almost ready to fire, and when it did, Earth would be torn apart at the atomic level. The Unity field might have ended the war, but it would be meaningless if humanity's homeworld was destroyed in the final moments. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez had survived the battle in the Hegemony home system and made it back to Earth just in time to witness the Unity field's activation. Her fighter was too damaged for combat, but she refused to abandon her post. She watched helplessly as the Starbreaker prepared to fire, knowing that all their sacrifices might be for nothing. Then something unexpected happened. The Unity field began to affect the Starbreaker itself, not through its shields but through the weapon's own energy systems. The precursors had designed their counterweapon specifically to turn the Starbreaker's power against itself, and now their ancient plan was finally being put to the test. The massive weapon began to overload. As its energy systems resonated with the Unity field's quantum frequencies, Korvax frantically tried to abort the firing sequence, but his commands were ignored by computer systems that were now connected to the galactic consciousness through their own energy networks. The Starbreaker's weapon fired, but instead of destroying Earth, the beam was redirected by the Unity field back toward the fortress ship itself. The massive vessel began to tear itself apart as its own ultimate weapon was turned inward. Secondary explosions chained through the hull as the Starbreaker's power source went critical. In his final moments, Korvax felt the Unity field break through his isolation as the ship's shields failed. For the first time in his life, he experienced what his victims had felt during centuries of conquest and oppression. The fear, the pain, the desperate hope for freedom that he had crushed so many times. The realization of what he had done and what he had become was overwhelming. But the Unity field did not just show Korvax his victim's pain. It also revealed the loneliness and fear that had driven him to seek power over others. The galactic consciousness felt his anguish and understood that even the greatest tyrant was once someone who needed love and acceptance. His death became a moment of sadness rather than celebration, a tragedy that the entire galaxy shared. Admiral Susan Blake stood in the rebuilt command center of New Denver Station 5 years later, watching as representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered for the annual Unity Day celebration. The galaxy had changed beyond recognition since the end of the war. The old hegemony territories had been transformed into free democratic governments, while former slave worlds were rebuilding their civilizations with help from the galactic community. The Unity field had become a permanent part of galactic civilization, though participation was always voluntary. Those who chose to join the network could share thoughts and emotions with beings from other worlds, creating understanding and empathy that made war increasingly impossible. Those who preferred privacy were respected and protected, but most beings found that the benefits of connection outweighed the costs. Commander Jack Harrison, now promoted to Admiral, led the Galactic Exploration Service, a joint organization that included members from every spacefaring species. Their mission was to explore beyond the galaxy's edge, seeking other civilizations that might benefit from contact with the Unity field network. The diversity of the exploration teams made them ideally suited for making first contact with unknown species. Dr. Lisa Morgan had become the director of the Interspecies Science Consortium, overseeing research projects that combine knowledge from dozens of different species. The scientific advances made possible by Unity field collaboration were transforming galactic civilization, with new technologies and discoveries emerging at an unprecedented rate. the political structure of the galaxy had been completely reorganized. The Galactic Council gave representation to every world based on population rather than military strength, ensuring that even the smallest colonies had a voice in galactic affairs. Former hegemony worlds were welcomed as equals rather than conquered territories, with many of their leaders becoming advocates for the new democratic system. Amy Rodriguez had left the military to become a civilian flight instructor on New Terra, humanity's newest colony world. She taught mixed classes of human and alien children, watching them learn to pilot together with the same cooperative spirit that had won the war. The children played games that would have been impossible before the Unity Field, sharing dreams and stories across species barriers that their parents had once thought insurmountable. The transformation had not been without challenges. Some beings found the Unity Field overwhelming and chose to live in isolated communities where they could maintain their traditional ways of life. Others struggled with the new democratic systems, preferring the certainty of authoritarian rule to the complexity of freedom. But these problems were addressed through patience and understanding rather than force. On New Terra, Amy watched a group of children from a dozen different species playing together in the colony's central park. Human children ran alongside young Ashanti, whose crystal bodies caught the sunlight like prisms. Builder offspring that looked like mechanical toys climbed on playground equipment designed by Whisper architects who understood both solid and gaseous forms of play. The sight filled Amy with satisfaction and hope. This was what they had, really, been fighting for during the dark days of the war. Not just survival, but the chance to create something better than what had existed before. A galaxy where differences were celebrated rather than eliminated, where the strong protected the weak instead of exploiting them. As the sun set over New Terra, Amy reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. Humanity had refused to bow to tyranny, but their true victory was not in defeating the hegemony but in inspiring the galaxy to rise above its old patterns of conquest and domination. The Unity Field had made possible a level of cooperation and understanding that would have seemed like fantasy just a few years earlier. The galaxy was still far from perfect, but it was growing and learning. Each generation of children who grew up with the Unity Field was more tolerant and understanding than the last. War was becoming obsolete not through conquest, but through the simple recognition that all sentient beings shared the same fundamental needs and desires. Amy smiled as she watched the children play, their laughter echoing across the settlement. The future was bright, and for the first time in galactic history, every species had a chance to reach for the stars together.